Let's talk about CPR and the AED provider. And that would be you and I, okay, the rest of us that are getting trained here. So I earlier told you that the defibrillator is designed to stop your heart, and therefore, you know, you've got to be pretty careful with them. You've got to, a lot of people get nervous in using them because they can hurt you. But they're so automated nowadays, you really don't have to pay much attention to it. It's all taken care of. But nevertheless, some people are of the opinion that, well, if I get involved and I try to help somebody, and especially if I mess up, I'm going to get in trouble. And I want to share with you what the Good Samaritan laws will cover you for. Good Samaritan laws are in every state in the United States. And here in Florida, I'll show you the statute in a second. But here in Florida, they're particularly interested in getting people involved to help other people. And so the Good Samaritan laws are designed to help all of us, including professionals. And so there's only 3 requirements in order to receive the benefits of Good Samaritan protection. Number 1, you have to be helping on a voluntary basis. So if, let's say I'm a doctor and I happen to be driving down the road and I come upon a motor vehicle accident and there's a guy laying on the side of the road and his legs are going in about 3 directions, and I look at him and I say, I could probably fix that for $500. That's not covered by Good Samaritan laws. But even being a doctor, if he came along and just out of the goodness of his heart, if he was willing to help out and see what he could do to help these people, up to this point, he's covered by Good Samaritan laws. And so are the rest of us. Everyone is. So first of all, we have to do this voluntarily. Secondly, we have to, if the patient is alert, now obviously if there's sudden cardiac arrest, they're unconscious, so they're not alert. But let me give you an example. Let's say you're at a restaurant and some guy gets up from the table and he's choking. And you run over to see if you can help him out. If you grab a hold of him and start reefing on him, doing an abdominal thrust or the Heimlich maneuver, first of all, you can be sued for battery. And secondly, you can be arrested for battery. And number 2, he can sue you. Why? Because you laid hands on him before you got permission to do that. So if you run over to this choking victim, even though he may not be able to communicate with you by talking, if you say, do you want me to help you? And he nods his head, you now have his permission. Now you can do an abdominal thrust, Heimlich maneuver, whatever, to try to help him out. And you're still covered by Good Samaritan laws. The third thing is you have to act in a reasonable and prudent manner. What's that mean? Well, essentially it's, if you take a group of people and say, how would you handle the situation? If you would respond similarly in the same fashion, that's reasonable and prudent. But let me give you an example. Let's go back to the guy that's choking at the restaurant. If you ask him for permission, do you want me to help you? And he nods his head, and you yell out, somebody get me a steak knife, I'm going to do a tracheotomy. Whoa. That might help him, right? It might help him, but is that reasonable and prudent? No, it really isn't. Okay, so even if you stayed at a Holiday Inn Express the night before, it doesn't matter, that's still not reasonable and prudent. And so you have to act reasonable and prudent in order to be covered by Good Samaritan laws. So there's really only 3 requirements, and basically it boils down to use common sense. Okay, that's really what it's all about.
Question.
Yep.
What if they're under 18?
Oh, good question. This is for adults. Thank you, Brian. This is for adults. You have to get permission from adults. If they're under the age of 18, it doesn't matter what they say. You, the adult, get to make the decision. So, for example,
need to get permission from somebody else sitting at the table.
if there's a guardian or a parent that's with that person under 18, you have to get their permission. But the 18-year-old or the person that's 10 or 12, or let's say you're over at Pear Park and they're playing on the equipment and mom and dad dropped them off and they're going to come back and pick them up in an hour. Well, if they get hurt, let's say they're bleeding like crazy, and what are kids taught these days? Stranger danger. Okay, so you come over and you say, well, I'll help you out, and they're saying, no, 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 stay away, because they've been taught, stay away from strangers. Well, it doesn't matter what that kid says. You get to make that decision because you're the adult. So if the parents aren't around, if the guardians are not around, then you get to decide how to treat that patient. And so it doesn't matter if the kid says yes or no or maybe or whatever. You, under Good Samaritan law, have the right to deal with that child. The other part, in sudden cardiac arrest, where the patient is not alert and you cannot talk to them, cannot communicate with them, the law is on your side because you have something called implied consent. Implied consent. So that means that if they were awake and you could talk to them and you said, do you want me to help you? They would say yes. So it's implied. The law says that it's implied. You have implied consent to go ahead and treat them. Okay? Any other questions on that part? All right, well, this is a copy of the Florida statute of Good Samaritan, and I've highlighted a couple areas. It says any person. Doesn't matter if you're a professional or not, if you've been trained or not, it's any person who gratuitously and in good faith, without objection of the injured victim, if they act in a reasonable and prudent manner. So everything that we talked about on the first slide is contained in that statute. Now, furthermore, the Florida State Legislature said we want people to be using these defibrillators, these automated external defibrillators, because they are so foolproof that it's really, really difficult to use it and harm someone. And so they encourage everybody. It says any person. It doesn't say any trained person. It says any person. They want any person to use these defibrillators. You have to remember, these things were designed 40 years ago. These automated external defibrillators were, first of all, given to the firefighters and the ambulance people. And so if a firefighter can figure out how to use them, you guys can, all right? I can say it because I was one. Okay. All right, so just use common sense. If there's an emergency, then you want the guys with the equipment and the knowledge to get there as quickly as possible. So call 911 or have someone call 911 for you as soon as possible. If the scene is not safe, please don't enter. You are not going to help anybody if you yourself become injured. And so don't become another victim. So if the area is unsafe, just don't enter. If you see somebody laying on the ground and you go to check out and all of a sudden you get hit with a really noxious odor, back off, because that might be what took that person out, and you don't want to be the next victim.